is Buffy Cattell, and this week I'm joined with Ursula Wong. What's going on, Ursula?
Buffy, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a cold day, as we were just talking about, but I'm glad to have you here, and we can talk about all your books because you seem very accomplished as a writer.
I've been writing for 10 years. I had a long run as in the computer industry, and I ended up as an IT director. And then my husband and I retired early, and he built houses for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Lowell. He's on number 20. And I write books, and I'm on number 6, if you don't count 2 novellas and a couple of anthologies. So we're busy.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that. And I guess just to jump right into this, I want to know, what is your newest book and what is it about? And I guess, what was your process of writing it?
Oh, my goodness. Okay, the last question first. So the latest book is Gypsy Amber. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yep, I can see it.
This is the Lithuanian flag, the colors of the Lithuanian flag.
Oh, cool.
Yellow, green, and red for the wheat fields, the forest, and the blood. So I write about Lithuania and its relationship with Russia. And the last book, I mean, each book seems to evolve from the previous one, but the start of it some years ago was, let me find it, book number 1. The start of it was Amber Wolf, which I'm going to put up, see the same colors and so forth, but Amber Wolf. This book, Amber Wolf, started, actually with my uncle. He was in Europe during World War II. He was in the US Army. And he met many Eastern European displaced persons who were actually fleeing either the Nazis or the Soviets. And it was a horrible time. Well, anyway, he kept in touch with a lot of those folks. So after the war ended, of course, he came back to the United States. He went to law school. He became an attorney. He had a life. Decades passed. He died. So I went through his things and I found manuscripts. And these manuscripts, there were several of them. Some of them were stories in his handwriting, but the bulk of the material were rough manuscripts from others writing about their experience in Europe during the war. So one was about a priest in a concentration camp in Poland. Another one was about the Soviet occupation of the Baltic states of Lithuania. My ancestral heritage is Lithuanian. So this manuscript was about, the Soviet invasion and occupation of Lithuania, starting in during World War II, which is, in 1944, the second occupation started. So I read this manuscript and I didn't know anything of this history. And I think as a Lithuanian American, or just, an American who is reasonably intelligent and reads quite a bit and, tries to be aware of history and one's past, I knew nothing of that experience. And of course, I'm talking about the 1980s and 90s at this point. And so I started researching what the wartime experience was in Lithuania. And I started with a generous swath. I started researching Lithuania under the Tsar, the 1800s. And then it's her World War I experience, and then her period of freedom after World War I in the power gap, because Germany was gone, the empire was gone, the Austro-Prussian Empire was gone, and Lithuania and many of Eastern European countries became free. And then World War II came, Hitler invaded, then the Soviets invaded, and the Soviets stayed. And that we know that history, that general history, but we don't know the experience. So these manuscripts told me about that experience. And I was a little bit surprised. I read a lot of things that I couldn't believe happened. That was really a horrible story, especially in Lithuania. And so I started researching it, and I researched it based on English language text. So I got, I must have been 100 at least history books. In many, Lithuania was a chapter. The Baltic countries were a chapter, maybe a footnote, but I was able to validate the essence of, these manuscripts. And by then, years had passed and I had my own idea for a story, and that was Amber Wolf. So this is World War II, the Soviet occupation of Lithuania, and the resistance. And it's an incredible story. Lithuania, this little country the size of West Virginia, mostly agrarian, coming into World War II, mostly agrarian. They didn't want the occupation so badly that farmers, gentle farmers who milk cows for a living, stole weapons from the Nazis, fleeing their country going back to Berlin during 1944. They stole weapons to fight this massive Red Army invading their country. So it was tens of thousands of people against 1 million men. It's an incredible story. The resistance was tremendously powerful. We read about the French resistance. This has the same ilk of it, but it was different. It was very different. It was there was no happy medium here. It was violent, and Lithuania wanted self-determination, and they fought for years hoping that the West would come and save them, even after the war. And I talk about the post-world. You said, "Tell me what's going on." So I'm on this soliloquy here, but I'll end it pretty quickly. Amber War is about the post-World War II experience. What happened after the war, when Lithuanians were beginning to realize that nobody was going to come and save them, free them from the Soviet occupation. Amber Widow is, into the 70s and 80s, and even into modern day. But this talks about the nuclear power plants that the Soviets built in Lithuania and other parts of Eastern Europe, Ukraine and so forth. And during the breakup, the nuclear waste that was stolen and hidden in the woods. And that is, it's truth. And it is a spur that started the story of Amber Widow and a rebel group that gets hold of that nuclear waste and does something with it. And I've got 2 more books. Black Amber is in current day. Black Amber still has a Lithuanian flag, but Black Amber, it's a current novel about the pipelines that Russia is currently building under the Baltic Sea to get natural gas directly into Germany. There's a tremendous political backlash about it that's still going on. There's about some 70 kilometers of pipeline left to build. They're almost done. They spent over $11 billion on this pipeline. And there is such intense political backlash about it that there's a question as to whether it will be finished. But Black Amber is about that story. And Gypsy, the very latest, is about Central Asia. And it's this notion of China really putting more money and more people, more Chinese nationals living in Central Asia, and the notion that this is Russia's backdoor. This used to be the Soviet Union. So I postulate a reaction by the Russians to this. So that's how I spend my time, Buffy. What do you do?
I don't study Lithuania, but that's cool. I don't know anything really about Lithuania at all.
And the thing is, I have a special interest because of my ancestry, but it's a really interesting story. I think it's a very compelling story. And I bring in a lot of other countries too. I talk about Poland during World War II. There was a group of Polish paratroopers, crackshot paratroopers, and communication specialists and so forth that were actually trained in England. And they parachuted into Poland during the war to try to fight specific Nazi concentrations. Fascinating stories. And of course, Central Asia, this mass of land that nobody knows anything about, but that also, it's a Muslim country. It's very, very interesting stuff. History is very interesting, but
no, I'm a history buff also. My brother, I have a twin brother. He's studying history. He wants to be a history teacher. We're a big history family. I just don't know much about that area. It's kind of amazing when you dive into these things and you start to learn not only about the history, but how it impacts you, and these are my relatives, or these could have been my relatives, or these are my ancestors, and that type of thing. And it hits you in an emotional way, right?
And I feel that historical fiction is a great way to try to convey a lot of history in a dose. Not a lot of people have the time or the patience to go through a textbook, although I do. That's where I get it. But anyway, reading the history in the context of a story. So historical fiction, how much is true and how much is false? So I try to be very clear in the preface of my books where the fiction is and where the truth is. So that in reading a story where you're presented people who have lives and personalities and they live through the history, I think it gives a certain dimension that it can be very valuable. It can open one's eyes to something they didn't know before. And I, especially with Amber Wolf, the first book, I really tried to introduce some of the old Lithuanian stories, how the great city of Vilnius was formed by Grand Duke Vytautas sleeping in the woods and having a dream. And I try to bring in all of these aspects, a little bit of the food, a little bit of the culture and so forth to give a better taste. And I think historical fiction should do that sort of thing. I mean, even if you were to write a story about your roots in Italy, the smell of the garlic cooking, the smell of the sea, the crispy sound of fish frying, all of the little details that you can kind of imagine or know about and put them on the page, and it really makes the story explode for the readers.
Back to your books, do you self-publish? Do you have a publisher? What has been your route of, releasing?
I go with small press. So small press is considered on the traditional side as opposed to the independent side of publishing. I actually teach courses on the, I do an overview of publishing for the Seven Bridge Writers Collaborative Organization. In fact, next month I'm doing courses on independent publishing tools. But I go with small press, and it's a company called Generatarium. They're not accepting new clients at this point. So, it's a very small mom and pop kind of shop. They have exquisite editing skills. They have a really good book cover artist. And through I published my first book. Where's my first book? Purple Trees. My debut novel is with Generatarium. I'm trying to find it. Here it is. I did Purple Trees years and years ago. My debut novel. It's about a woman in central Massachusetts who has a very dysfunctional youth, and it's how it follows her through life. It's her story. But they helped me with Purple Trees. They gave me the confidence to go through because, I had been working I have a degree in physics. I have another degree in math. I worked in computers. I debugged looking at binary values and registers. I did all sorts of stuff before getting into writing. Writing is relatively new to me. And, changing careers like that, going to school to be able to change careers like that, I had to really build up my confidence to do this. And this little company, this, mom and pop shop Generatarium really helped me, put that idea that was my first novel, Purple Trees, on paper and to get it out. And I've stayed with them. I've gone a little bit with other companies, Books and Booze Press for a time while they were active, and then the story side of other publishing companies I've used. But Generatarium is my heartthrob. And because they're so small, I had the opportunity, I continue to have the opportunity to do things with them. So I learned how to format books, manuscripts. I learned how to, I learned the logistics of book covers. I think book covers takes a certain artistry that I don't have. I'm not trained that way, but I know technically what it means. I've done all sorts of marketing and ad campaigns through Generatarium. So through them and their openness, to partner with me, I've been able to learn a tremendous amount. And as I said, I've turned that around, and I teach a lot of courses in the area to try to jumpstart other folks on their writing path. Because I remember years ago when I was doing Purple Trees, it took a long time to figure out what the lay of the land was. And now that I understand it to a degree, I think a fairly large degree, I can help other people just omit all of this kind of sputter start. Should I do this? And you go down one path for a while, and then you realize it's not right. You try another path. So that's what I think I contribute to the area. And if anybody's interested, they should go to the Seven Bridge, number 7, bridge.org site and just see what's going on. A lot of the programs are free, and some of them, require a little bit of money. But it's a good way to really get information from people who've been there and have done that. But small press. I am a full believer in small press, and I think it's a great option, and it's an opportunity to learn a lot about publishing and writing. In fact, for me, it worked out extremely well.
It does sound like it worked out for you very well. I know publishing is like it's its own beast. Like
it is.
Like it's one process to even just write the book, and then it's a whole nother process to publish anything. And I know some people go different routes, and I'm really glad that you have a dedicated publisher. It's really awesome, and that you're this, I guess, passionate about it is great to see. So I guess next on the agenda, I would like to know, what is your story and how did you end up, you kind of touched on how you became a writer after you retired, kind of, right?
Right.
Have you always been a writer, or, what is your story?
Well, computer engineering and programming. So programmers don't like to say they're writers, but they really have to be, because code has to be documented. And when you design larger systems, either through code or through machines talking to machines or dealing with data, you have to be able to tell somebody else how it works. And that needs to be on paper. So in certain regard, I've been writing all my life. But I wanted to get into fiction. It's been kind of a back burner thing for me. And I wanted to do something when we retired that I could do anywhere. So writing was the answer for me. And in the first years we retired, I had in mind doing magazine articles. But when I started going to school, I took a lot of courses, UMass Lowell and the Center for Adult Education in Cambridge, a lot of Grub Street. I took a lot of courses those first few years, and I just got into short stories right away. I have dozens of them. And pretty soon I was into novels, and especially finding that manuscript from my Uncle Frank, that really got me thinking about this wartime experience. And that just gelled into this book, Amber Wolf, where I focused on a character, a young 20-something-year-old woman who was, living at home with her mother. And all of a sudden, the country is occupied by these Soviet soldiers, and it's a crisis. And so I looked at the history from her perspective. And I got there from thinking about that in doing all these stories and all these classes. How would the character react in the history? So that's how it evolved. And now I'm all about novels and novellas. So that was the path for me.
That's interesting how you've kind of gone on a journey with just what type of writing you like to do. I agree with you. I kind of like the thing that, I guess, the space that a novel gives you, if that makes any sense, or like a feature film, you have more time to dive into your characters and stuff. And I guess I like that a little bit more because it really allows you to get into it, where I think sometimes with the short, it's not as, I don't know if it's still fulfilling, but we were talking about this before we were recording, that sometimes it takes more work to just write a short than it does to write a feature. And I totally agree with you.
With a short story, I think you have to really figure out that nub, that concentration of emotion and change that is the core to that story. And in a novel, you have hundreds of pages where you can just develop that. And, sometimes it changes from your original notion, but you have the opportunity to just give it breath. In a short story, you really got to figure it out, and that's what you write about. So I think both require just as much effort. Oddly enough, a 5,000 word story requires almost as much effort as a 250 page novel. But odd as it is, I think that's the way of it.
So I have an additional question, I guess, about your life. So you wrote, your first novel was about a young woman growing up in central Massachusetts. Are you from this area, or are you from somewhere else?
I am Massachusetts born and bred. I'm a local girl, proud of it. I come from a little area in Hardwick, Massachusetts, up by the Quabbin Reservoir. And that's where I grew up. We had a dairy farm. Lovely, lovely, lovely place. It's still in the family. And I grew up with two big brothers who teased me like you wouldn't believe. Well, maybe you would. Those sisters with brothers, maybe you'll believe that. And my father passed when we were quite young. It was a dairy farm. My father passed when we were quite young. So our lives changed a great deal after that. We kept the farm, and it, instead of these afternoons taking picnics and, an evening going out for ice cream, we worked. And I remember the summers with my brothers, baling hay and loading it on the trailers and getting it into the hayloft. And we had this game. So we would have to get the baled hay. The baler would bale the hay. We'd pick it up from the field, load it on a trailer, and bring it home. And then we had to unload from the trailer and get the hay into the barn. And of course, the barn is big. And we would have to fill from the middle to the front or from the middle to the back. So one evening, my brothers and I were filling it from the back, and we had a relay. So one brother was close to where the pile was inside the barn. My middle brother was in the middle, and I was on the back of the trailer unloading this hay. The game was to go as fast as you could to knock over the next person. So nobody was there knocking me over, but we made fun of it. In describing it, it doesn't sound like much fun, but I guess it's all relative.
Yeah, I guess fun depends on what your definition of fun is. Getting knocked over by brothers seems like a good time, I guess.
But anyway, after that, I went away to college, and then I, got involved with, different jobs. I worked for different companies, and, got into a career. And, 30 years later, here I am writing books. So,
That is a great path, and I love people that just end up becoming writers later on. Like it's really nice to see that you found something that you enjoy. You have, is it how many novels do you have? 6, 7?
I'm working on number 7.
So you have 6, right?
I lose count. Yeah, I have 6 novels and 2 novellas.
That's amazing. I can't even imagine. And you've done that in 10 years. That's a lot of work to do in 10 years, right?
Well, it keeps me off the streets. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're such a troublemaker, Ursula, I can tell. So maybe it's good that you're just writing all the time.
Good for humanity, right?
Good for humanity, yeah. We got to keep people like you off the streets. I know.
Yeah.
I was gonna look. I forget. I had just pulled up the next question, then I forget. Oh,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what is your goal as a writer, and what milestones would you like to reach with your writing?
Every book I've written, I say it's the last one, but then I get to a point where I think of something and I realize that would be a great next book. So I'm working on Gypsy Amber was the last book. That's about Central Asia and Chinese and Russian interests. And the next book is going to be Amber Spy. And this is about the history of intelligence and espionage. A lot of emphasis on a lot of information about Russia, but I also want to talk about all of the surveillance that went on in the Baltic countries and Lithuania during the Soviet occupation. It was so intense. There was so much of it. There is a museum in a Lithuanian city named Kaunas dedicated to revealing the extent of the Soviet surveillance after World War II. So I want to put that into the story and really talk about espionage. And really, what spurred this, is right now the Russians are having a little bit of trouble with their intelligence operatives. And what seems to be happening is that, these good Russian, officers trained in intelligence and all of the tradecraft involving, espionage, they come to the United States, and some of them undergo an epiphany and they want to stay. So they're either relaxing their tradecraft techniques, or they're just slipping away, trying to, melt into American society so they don't have to really do any work they were trained to do. So it's a little bit of a crisis right now for Russia, to my understanding and reading about this. So I want to emphasize that that's what Amber Spy is about. I want characters to undergo these transformations that intelligence operators are undergoing, and really show you what that world is like. And, here's the thing, this really kills me. So I am not a spy. I spent a lot of time in front of a computer in my days, hours and hours and hours. I don't even want to calculate how many hours. And so I'm writing about intelligence. So there's a tremendous amount of history, a lot of books you can read on the subject, a lot of spy novels, John le Carré, and others. So you can get a lot of movies, so you can get a really good feel for it, especially the Cold War. Not so much now; it's a little bit different. You have, a little bit of a different story. But so, how do you make this real? I mean, how do you make a reader understand that your information is not only genuine, but it has a personality? And I think that even though you don't experience a specific history, you haven't lived through something, that you can learn to write about it. But when it comes to the point of somebody dying or somebody realizing that they're in a life-changing situation, or they've lost a friend, or they've they know in their core they failed at something, these are all experiences we've had. And that's knowing that and being able to get it out onto the page at the right time. That's what the aspect of novels that, when people say, write what you know, the emotions are what you know, the history you can learn. Anyway, that's what I think about it.
You write a lot of historical fiction, obviously. So what is your favorite historical period? Not to write about, but just in general.
Today.
Really? Today?
Absolutely. I find that today, metaphorically, 2 years ago, I was into what happened 2 years ago. A year ago, I was into what happened. So I get my jollies from reading about the news today. And I think it's fascinating. Now, there is so much going on in the world. We cannot possibly know that, by the way, China is investing $100 billion into Central Asia. Did you know that?
No, yeah. I did not. I don't know. I don't know. There's too much.
Exactly. So these little threads that I come up with, these things that I come up with, I expand them, and that I try to put them in novels when it's appropriate. But that's what I find fascinating. I think that, and relating it to a history. So here's the thing. So I'm giving a talk at the Prescott Community Center in Groton in February. If anybody's interested, they can look up Prescott Community Center. But this talk is about Central Asia. It's about Gypsy Amber in Central Asia and the political situation, how women are, the scenario with women there. And very shockingly to me, Central Asia, occupied by the Soviets. It was part of the Soviet Empire during the second half of the 20th century. And women worked, women had jobs, they went to school, boys and girls went to school. Today, it's not true. Women stay home. Women are wearing the scarves, they're covering. Girls may not go to school. because families think, well, she's going to get married and improve the situation of her husband's family. So why should we spend money educating her? These are real themes going on in parts of Central Asia, and they really resonate with me as a Westerner and a modern woman of the 21st century. They really resonate, and I see it as bad. I don't think people in Central Asia see it as bad. I see it as bad. But, perspective is everything, right? So that kind of thing really, really interests me. And I was so shocked by that, because in Lithuania, it was completely different. The Soviets were seen as an invading army. They were not wanted. They were not needed. People fought them. And women sharpshooters in Estonia had a woman sharpshooter, 18 years old. She was an amazing sharpshooter. Women fought, right next to the men. They did whatever they could do to, join this resistance and try to get the Soviets out of their country. But that contrast was so extreme. And, it just drew me into research more and more and more. And, that's what I write about in Gypsy Amber. In part, I read about a lot of things in Gypsy Amber, but, it's part of the picture, evolving the history, you evolve what it's like for the people. And, even though today might be the most interesting thing, understanding how, people got to today, to their perspectives today, I think is interesting too. But I'm going to talk about that. All of the history, the relationship between Central Asia and Russia, going back to Genghis Khan, in the 1200s, this horde of warriors riding horses, stampeding down from the plains of Russia. It wasn't Russia at the time, it was Mongolia, and speeding down into Central Asia and just wiping out villages and slaughtering people. It was just incredible. This happened for hundreds of years until, actually Russia gained some momentum and started, resisting this horde of invaders. But, seeing how that evolves into a structure where in Central Asia, the Silk Road and emirs really were dictators, or khans were, dictators of areas, oases. And, how that evolved to a situation where when the Soviets came in, they, in certain respect, were seen as almost liberators, right? Because people weren't under the thumb of one dictator. They were in a communist system. We think of it as being under a thumb, but, it brought in new opportunities and new insights. And then when it went away, it's like, things reverted a little bit to what it was like. But anyway, I'm going on. I think the evolution, how things change, the perspective change with history is very fascinating.
And I totally agree. And obviously, we know there were elements, very bad elements of communism, but it brought, women were considered equal, and they could do things, and they were encouraged to go into manufacturing and do things, typical men jobs, and in Russia and things like that. And when that's gone, it's like, oh, okay, now it's not as important. And I'm very much a feminist and passionate about that stuff also. So it's really interesting that you also have a passion in that. I guess before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to talk about or say?
Wow. I think that, first of all, thank you, Buffy, for having this show. I think that, linking writers with readers is a good thing that should be encouraged. So thank you for the opportunity. I encourage people to, look at the Severn Bridge organization, look at Prescott Community Center. If you're interested in what I'm doing personally as a writer, my website is ursulawong.wordpress.com. Take a look on the website, read about the books, maybe something will interest you. I've got information for writers, little treatises on historical fiction, publishing options. I told you I teach a course on publishing. I have a paper on my website which very succinctly goes through the variations of traditional publishing with large press, medium press, small press, and then what independent publishing really means, whether you do it all yourself, a DIY model, or whether you hire a company to help you in a hybrid situation. So I have all that information on my website if anyone's interested. But I think it's great that you're having so many writers on your show, and we're learning about all sorts of different things. I saw some of your past episodes, and a woman was talking about Buddhism, and I thought that was fascinating. And another woman was talking about the finances involved with divorce. Very, very good stuff, Buffy. So thank you for the opportunity to bring all these, disassociated topics together so that your viewing audience can kind of experience some different thought lines from writers.
I love it. I love that you came on. I'm so appreciative because we only have a show if people reach out to me. I don't, if you're a writer out there and you have a book or whatever you have that's published, we even had a guy come on who's mid-process right now working on something.
He should go to my website and read about the publishing options because it'll help him.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys later.